What up, people? I'm the Godless engineer, and today we're going to be continuing with Lee Strobel's 5 E's on why Jesus was real and you should be a Christian. Now, just to recap, the first 3 E's: the execution, an early church, the empty tomb, and now we're on to number 4, which is...
He had a motive. I think the best explanation for the tomb being empty is that Jesus did return from the dead, especially when we combine it with the 4th word that begins with the letter E, which is the word eyewitnesses.
So, yes, as you can see, it's eyewitnesses. I can't wait to see which eyewitnesses this guy brings out. I mean, surely it can't be actual eyewitnesses. My guess is that it's just people that were written down in a book that supposedly were there. Maybe not even witnessed by the person that was writing it. That's my guess. But let's see what evidence he has to support his claim here. My guess is that we're still just going to get more anecdotal evidence.
Discovered empty. But over a period of time, Jesus appears alive in a dozen different instances to more than 515 people.
Ha! Told you! To more than 515 people. Okay. Well, I would love to know who those 515 people were. Or are they just vaguely written about in Paul's letters, which actually he didn't witness. Like, he just heard about it from Jesus. You know, that mysterious vision that he had that is not placed on earth at all. You know, that Jesus that doesn't exactly exist other than in Paul's brain. That one, or could it be from the earlier gospel, or not gospels, but earlier scriptures? You know, like the Talmud, the Septuagint, the Old Testament. I mean, could he have read that and gotten that? Oh, people would have witnessed them, and then he pulled 500 out of his ass because I mean, it's a literary work. There's no way that you know anybody at the time could have really corroborated it. But I mean, even that right there suggests that Paul wrote every single bit of his works. He assumed that every single bit of Paul's works were written by Paul. But even today, there's evidence to suggest that, like good evidence to suggest that Paul, or the author Paul, only wrote 7 of them and not the full, like, was it 13? Books of the Bible. So, I mean, Paul still wrote a good bit of the New Testament. He didn't write all that Lee Strobel thinks. And Lee likes to throw that shit right out the window. I mean, he likes to just ignore that kind of evidence. I mean, he doesn't care if you know, you can't substantiate it historically that he wrote those pieces, or if even these 500 these 500 people actually witnessed Jesus.
To skeptics and doubters and opponents, as well as to believers. To groups and individuals. To men, to women, indoors, outdoors, daytime, nighttime. People talk with them, they touched them, they ate with them. I mean, think about this. Remember we said we're lucky in ancient history if we have 1 or 2 sources to confirm a fact? Get this. For the conviction of the disciples that they encountered the resurrected Jesus, we have no fewer than 9 ancient sources inside and outside the New Testament, confirming and corroborating their conviction that they encountered the risen Christ.
I don't know about that. Because if the 9 sources inside the Bible and outside the Bible, okay, well, inside the Bible, you can't really count it because the Bible is like the claim. Any sources that reference Jesus in the Bible is going to be the claim. Like that's the thing that's claiming Jesus was real and is defining the traits of Jesus, okay? Whether or not those traits are contradictory is here nor there. But the ones outside the Bible, you really have to look at when they were written. If they were written at a time when Christianity would have been established already, like the beliefs of the religion and everything, you can't really count on them reporting actual history. And here's why, is because you can't, like there's no way There's no way to really separate out them hearing this information like 15th, 16th, 21st hand, whatever. You can't separate out that from firsthand information. I mean, just because they're relaying that Christians exist and this is what they believe. I mean, if that is literally, if those are the sources that you're talking about, which I'm sure because I've read all of the sources outside of the Bible that concern Jesus, all of them, literally all of them, Tacitus, Josephus, even though that one was forged, any others that you can think of, they report what Christians thought at the time. And I don't even know why I'm putting this on a Fallacy Friday video. This should really go on a Did Jesus Exist video, because I'm totally debunking the hell out of Lee Strobel on the historicity of Jesus. But I mean, basically, he's special pleading at this point, by wanting to use those sources, because those aren't used by historians to actually do history. Like, that's not how historians establish an event in history. I mean, he's right about the corroborating instances and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you're not going to see anybody sent to the death penalty or to jail or anything like that because one stranger wrote an obscure sentence or an obscure paragraph or any fucking thing that you can't establish whether or not the person was actually there. You just have this obscure sentence. There's no way that would hold up in court. That's no way that a historian would consider that to be a reliable source. So you really have to think about the context of the source, when the source was written, and what the source actually says.
That is an avalanche of historical data.
No, it's not. Quit lying, Lee.
And look what it did to them. History tells us that after Jesus is executed, the disciples are cowering, they're afraid. They're thinking they're going to get crucified. They're going to go back to the fishing business. And then history undeniably shows us, it's just a short time later, those same disciples in the same city where Jesus had been executed just a few weeks before, get up and are proclaiming with boldness that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, he backed it up by returning from the dead.
I would contend that because, I have a contentions with that particular statement because there's nothing whatsoever to suggest that the disciples actually witnessed Jesus being crucified, other than the sources in the Bible, which circular logic. You can't use the Bible as its own evidence. I mean, you don't have anything to really cement in history that these disciples got up just a few weeks later, started walking around and preaching to people, and raising this whole Christian army of souls that they're winning. Another really big point is that Christianity was widespread across the Mediterranean. It wasn't just located in one particular city. Like you have it across vast distances, and there's a lot of different communities in the first century. We see that through writings outside of the Bible. People complaining about how the pagans have influenced Christianity, and they don't like it. That was concerning God's fathering of Jesus. I forget who the author is, but he said that a lot of Christians were complaining that pagans were influencing their religion. And so that shows that there were a lot of vastly different communities. So there wasn't just one community that started. There were several communities that started over a span of time across the Mediterranean. So you can't cement in history, at least you're not going to give us anything to really cement in history, that Christianity started up in the very city that Jesus was crucified in. Because another thing to consider is that the Bible was written, of course, throughout the Mediterranean, just like there were several communities of Christians in the Mediterranean. It was written by various authors throughout, the years and years and years after he supposedly was crucified. Of course, the earliest writings we have are Paul, which occurred about 55 AD. But the Gospels aren't shown to be written any earlier than like 70 AD. And it even goes on into the 2nd century that some of these things were written. So, to say that the Bible relates any kind of historical evidence for Jesus at 30 AD, but yet a good bit of them weren't written until 55, when the religion was already beginning to be established. And Paul is supposed to be one of the founders of it or whatnot. He's supposed to be the first, wasn't he the first pope? I think it was. Yeah. You have all these different Christianities going around, and so it would make sense that you would have different versions of the gospel if there were different communities of Christians. It would make sense that you had different types of Jesuses between the Markian Jesus, the Matthew, the Luke, and especially the John Jesus, which is just way fucking out there. He's kind of like the Trump of the Bible. From now on, the Gospel of John Jesus is now called Trump Jesus. Okay? Hashtag Trump Jesus.
And we have 7 ancient sources, inside and outside the New Testament, that tell us those disciples were willing to suffer deprivation, suffer pain. They were even willing to give up their lives for the proclamation that Jesus had risen. Not because they read it in a book, not because their parents told them about it, not because they heard it in a story somewhere, but because they were there.
Well, it's very important to point out here that just because they were willing to die for a belief doesn't mean that the belief is reality. That's just pure fucking lying there, Lee. Because, just the mere belief in Jesus, with how people are today, nobody today actually has seen Jesus. Okay, some of them say they feel Jesus, but you know what? Muslims feel Muhammad and Allah all the time. Probably not in good ways all the time, but anyways, people now today are so devout that they would die. You even have prominent evangelical Christians that are standing up on social media in the public eye that are saying to lay down your life for Jesus. So you don't actually have to know that this happened or anything like that in order to want to die for it. Now, regardless of whether or not the apostles were real, which me personally, I don't think the apostles actually existed, considering the fact that a lot of them, bear signs of astrological stuff, like the two twin brothers. They were significant of Gemini and whatnot, I think is what it was. But they all have astrological signs that are associated with them. Plus, with there being 12 apostles, they're supposed to represent the 12 tribes of Israel and whatnot. So, there's just a lot of things that kind of sync up with this idea of the 12 apostles that make it seem more like a literary device rather than actual history. And, when something seems more like the literature that was written around the time and literature in general, you can't really say that it's historical when it sounds exactly like a fucking fairy tale.
All the people who ever lived in history, the disciples were in the unique position to know for a fact whether Jesus had returned from the dead or not. They saw him, they touched him, they talked with him. They knew the truth. And knowing the truth, they were willing to give their lives for it. Friends, I spent 2 years of my life investigating the minutiae of the resurrection. And it all came down to a Sunday afternoon. And I went alone in my room, and I thought, I've been researching this for a couple of years. I need to reach a verdict. I need to reach a conclusion. I need to, So I said, I know what I'll do. I took a yellow legal pad, and I thought, I'm just going to write down, just get on paper, the highlights of the evidence I'd encountered during these 2 years. Just get it on paper. So I did. I started writing page after page after page after page after page after page. And finally, I put my pen down and said, wait a second. In light of this avalanche of evidence that points so powerfully toward the truth of Christianity, I realized it would take more faith to maintain my atheism than to become a Christian.
It doesn't take any kind of faith to be an atheist. You just have to look at the evidence with, skeptical eyes. What I see you doing here, though, is not doing that at all. What you seem to be doing is gathering this evidence, having it fit into some kind of presumption that you have about it, and then making it fit. That's not how you do science. That's not how you should investigate any kind of claim at all. You shouldn't make the evidence fit what you're trying to prove. I mean, at that point, you're doing bad science. You're doing bad investigative work. But all you seem to be doing is making the evidence fit to some kind of preconceived notion about it. Because, and I say this because, like with Paul, you just shuck out that not all of Paul's writings are by him himself. You don't even address it. A lot of his writings are forged. You don't even cover, which portions of Paul's writings or supposed writings you're talking about with the 500 witnesses. You say that it's scattered throughout Paul's writings, but then again, not all of Paul's writings are legit the one Arthur Paul. And it was really common around the time for people to say, hey, look, there's this letter, it's from Paul, and it's not from Paul, it's the douchebag that brought it to you. He wrote it and just signed Paul's name. Like, that was pretty much standard operating procedure for the first century. If you wanted to get your shit read, you write it up, and then you pin somebody else's name to it who's already got a bunch of publicity, and boom, your shit is in the eyes of a lot of people. So, Lee, that's why I say that you have this preconceived notion about what Jesus was, or what you have been told that Jesus should be. And so, basically, you're taking the evidence, and then you're molding it to fit that narrative. And that's doing bad science. That's doing bad investigative work. I hate to reiterate myself like that so many times, but I mean, I just wanted to get it through your head personally that is a bad way to investigate this particular claim. And by shucking away information, by disregarding information that you don't feel is pertinent to the historicity of Jesus, is another way to mold that. And the reason why I mention that is because a lot of people like to just say, oh, well, there wasn't a lot of writings around the time, so, there must have been a guy. That's molding the information to fit a preconceived notion about Jesus, that somebody had to have started it. Okay, well, there's this evidence. Oh, just forget about it. But that's not how you do it. And so, Lee, we're finishing up here on your particular one, your particular video.
I'm just saying. That was just my view. So that's when I reached my conclusion that based on the historical data, I was convinced that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, he backed it up by returning from the dead. And then, you know what I felt? A great sense of disappointment. I felt terribly let down. You know why? Because I'm thinking, should there not be an angel about now? An earthquake would be nice. Even a cloud with some lightning would be cool. Nothing happened. I thought, well, it's kind of a letdown. And then
yeah, it was kind of an anticlimactic moment when, you pretty much realized you could make a whole bunch of fucking money off of this by fooling people, making them think that you were actually an atheist, which I don't think that you were an atheist. I think you're bullshitting people. I think that you made up this whole narrative in order to sell books and shit. I think that is what actually happened. I think that you're being totally disingenuous with everything that you have said. I don't believe that you were actually an atheist, primarily because most of your arguments about how you were as an atheist sound exactly like Christian stereotypes of us. Like, you could have closed your eyes and I would have thought, holy shit, why am I watching God's Not Dead and God's Not Dead 2, all in the same fucking movie? Like, you could have done that. But, that's why I don't think that you were an atheist, but all we have is your word to go off of. That's my theory. I'm not going to be able to prove it, which I use theory in the colloquial way, like as in just a general idea of what happened, not a scientific theory, mind you. I just feel like that's important to state. So, Lee, congratulations, man. That's all I have to say. You figured out how to sell a whole lot of books and get rich off of lying to people, which, I mean, to be quite honest, that's what the entertainment industry does every day. I mean, you don't think, like, there's an actual agency called S.H.I.E.L.D. out there. I mean, they're lying to people, but at least they're upfront about it. They're like, these are fictional characters. You, however, are taking a fictional character and being like, nope, he's real. He's real as a $3 bill.
Wait a minute. Somebody had pointed out to me a verse in the Bible earlier. So I looked it up, John 1:12. It says, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believed in his name. And I looked at that verse and I noticed something. It forms an equation of what it means to become a child of God.
Hold on. You don't talk to an engineer and say equation. This is an equation. So let me fucking get my goddamn engineering pad and we will do this shit.
Believe plus receive equals become.
That's not math. You can't believe plus receive equals what the fuck ever. That's not any kind of equation. That's you making shit up and saying, "Hey, look, this is what we gotta. This is what happens." But that's not an equation. You shouldn't be presenting it as if it is. And you're just still being disingenuous as all get out.
I said, I'm getting somewhere. I believe, based on the data, that Jesus is who he claimed to be. I believe it. But I realized that wasn't enough. I had to receive. Receive what? Receive this free gift of forgiveness and eternal life that Jesus purchased on the cross when he died as my substitute.
It's not a free gift, though, there, Lee. I mean, you have to give over your free will, basically. I mean, you can still choose whether or not you want to believe or not, but, I mean, to give over your own... To give over your mind to religion, to not thinking, to a religion that literally starts off with, hey, we don't want you learning shit, so don't you fucking eat from this tree, okay, God damn it? When you have a religion that starts off that way, it should really make you think. But, throughout the Bible, it says, don't think. He says, lean not on your own understanding, but trust in me. That's what God says. When he tells you to give over the power of free thought, it should really make you pause and be like, something's fishy here. I can taste it in the air.
All of my sin. And when I would receive this free gift of his grace, then I would become a child of God. So I got on my knees next to my bed. And I poured out a confession of a lifetime of immorality that would absolutely curl your hair. And at that moment, I received complete and total forgiveness through Jesus Christ, and I became a child of God.
Well, good for you. That's it for Lee Strobel. I hope that you enjoyed this entire series. If you will go down below, I have a couple of Patheos articles that talk more about Lee Strobel's 5 points. It has some information in there that I didn't think to cover. So I definitely suggest going there. It's from the Patheos blog, Cross-Examined, and it's a really interesting read. I suggest you read it and really think about it. Think about what it says. Now, also, go down below and you will find the entire playlist of my debunk of Lee Strobel. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you will go back and see my rebuttal to his other points and his E's and everything like that. We're going to be moving on to the next debunk, and so I hope that you will enjoy that. And, while this pretty much only had one logical fallacy running all the way through it, which would be an anecdotal evidence, and, of course, there was appeal to authority. So, I mean, you got all of these great fallacies that he gave examples of here, and I just really hope that you're wary of people like this that spout these things off. As someone tells you a story about them being an atheist, and it sounds exactly like, Christian stereotypes of atheists, then you pause for a second and really question whether or not they were actually an atheist. I think that's the big thing to take away from this. It's not debunking his 4 E's. That's already been done. What you need to be wary of is how he presents it and what he says. Because if he starts off with a lie, if he starts off by being disingenuous, how can you really trust the rest of it? How can you trust what else he says when he's explaining it? So I hope that you'll keep that in mind. Go down below, check out those other links. I hope that you will subscribe as well. I have more fallacy videos that are going to be coming out. I'm going to be starting up a regular schedule, trying to keep busy and whatnot. So I will see you guys later. Y'all have a nice night.